everybody, and welcome to a very special production brought to you live from the Esports Arena at Shenandoah University in beautiful Winchester, Virginia. My name is Gawrysiak. I'm the Director of Esports here at Shenandoah, and I cannot be more excited about what you're about to see over the next hour and a half. Here at Shenandoah, our esports program likes to go beyond gaming, where it's not just about playing video games. And today couldn't be a better example of what exactly we're talking about when we say that we go beyond gaming. Today, this unique production called We Play Together is a collaboration from the conservatory here at Shenandoah University, the esports program, and our athletic training program, where we bring all these worlds together in a very different way than you've probably ever seen before. So I hope you're ready to engage with us and see some things that you've never seen. See some answers to some questions or hear them that you've never heard before. So get ready, and to tell you more about this special event, I'm going to pass it off to our mastermind, Mr. Aaron Hardwick, to give you the rundown about exactly what you can expect over the next hour and a half. Aaron, take it away.
Thank you so much, Joey. Welcome to We Play Together. I'm not as cool, I have to use my iPad. This is a collaboration between music and esports. And before we begin, I'd like to take a minute to thank a bunch of people that made this event possible. First, thank you to Shenandoah University, the School of Business, Joey Gawrysiak, and the entire esports program here. Thank you to Shenandoah Conservatory, and specifically Elisa D.M.A, Assisting Managing Director and Communications Coordinator, for all her marketing communications work on this project. I also want to thank Dr. Michele in the Division of Athletic Training and Performing Arts Medicine. Thank you to Golder O'Neill, Director of Shenandoah University Music Production and Recording Technology Program, and his entire team. And a shout out to our friends from all across the globe, from the Esports Research Network and Full Sail University here in the US, for joining us online today for this event. And finally, a huge thanks goes to the real stars of this show, our incredible Shenandoah students and performers who've been working behind the scenes to present this event to you. My name is Aaron Hardwick, and I'm Adjunct Teaching Fellow of Large Ensembles and Professor of Video Game Music here at Shenandoah University. I'm finalizing my doctorate in musical arts and orchestral conducting. I'm a professional conductor, instrumentalist, and amateur gamer. Today, you will witness an innovative platform that showcases transcurricular performance and learning related to both music and esports. First, we'll begin with a performance by Shenandoah Conservatory student instrumentalist John Toomer. John will have multiple cameras focused on his fingers and body motion. And as an audience, we ask that you observe, listen to what's going on, but also watch what he's doing. Jonathan's performance will be followed by a game performance of two Shenandoah esports athletes. Cameras will also be observing what's going on. And we ask that you pay close attention to what's going on in the game and how they're responding. And following our student performances will be a moderated Q&A that features a panel of experts discussing the practice, pedagogy, and performance of music and gaming. This project will conclude with an online interactive Q&A where you all will have the opportunity to provide questions to us live. So right now, start thinking of those questions. And when we get to that point, we'll try to get your question. This project will conclude with an amazing Q&A that we are going to be able to discuss these similarities that came to, as we've already found out, incredible cross-curricular and trans-curricular learning. So at this time, I want to introduce to you our violinist. This is Jonathan Toomer, who will be performing Eugene Ysaye's Ballade from Sonata No. 3 in D minor and J.S. Bach's Prelude to Partita No. 3 in E major. Again, thank you so much for being with us, and enjoy the event.
That was such an amazing performance from Jonathan. And I am so glad that you all are here with us today. I am Dr. Michele Pye, Assistant Professor in the Division of Athletic Training and the Associate Director of our Performing Arts Medicine Graduate Certificate. And I'm here with my colleague, Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Elizabeth Bowden, and I am the Assistant Professor of Trumpet at Shenandoah Conservatory. And wow, what a gorgeous performance from Jonathan. It takes a lot of work and dedication to pull off a performance like this that's very polished and memorized. It takes many years and hours in the practice room and slow, diligent practice. The training is very similar to athletes because not only do you have to learn the notes and rhythms, you have to make really clear, strong decisions about your musical phrasing, and you also have to not let the ego be part of the performance, not worry about, oh, I have an audience. You have to just focus on the music and be in the zone.
Absolutely. And I know that once you get in the zone, you feel very relaxed. And I think Jonathan was able to utilize a fluidity in his motion, rocking back and forth throughout playing, making sure he didn't hold too much tension in his shoulders. And for violin players, that's very helpful to release any tension that you might feel in your neck. You'll also notice he was able to actually hold his violin a little lower. And what that does is that alleviates the need to internally rotate your arm so much that you could cause some type of pinch or impingement as he's doing his bow work. I was very impressed, not only, as you mentioned, with the memory of it, but just with the overall performance, the variation in terms of the speed, the sound, all of that takes a lot of work.
Definitely. Bravo, Jonathan.
Yes. So we are going to transfer to our next student performer, Brad Blanchard, who will be playing Overwatch, and we'll have a moment to watch how esports work.
Hi everybody, my name is Zach Harrington. I'm the Assistant Director and Head Coach of Esports here at Shenandoah University. I'm glad to join you here on the desk, Michele.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here so we can discuss a little further what we're seeing while Brad is playing Overwatch.
Yeah, so I'll explain the game mode a little bit. He's doing 4v4 team deathmatch, which means unlike normal Overwatch, the objective is just to get more kills than the enemy team. So what we're seeing him play right now is a character called Tracer. Tracer is a very mechanically intensive character, as you can see by the fast movement and the twitch aim that he's employing. And Brad has spent a lot of time training his aim and reflexes to be able to effectively execute on this character.
Absolutely. And if you look in the hand camera, you can see there is a difference between what he has to do with his left hand versus his right hand. So while he's using a lot of quick triggers with his left hand, he has to have precision and accuracy in terms of where he is shooting and aiming with his right hand. And then combining that, you have to practice the coordination of that movement too.
Absolutely, and you know that's what you see when there are people who transition from controller to keyboard and mouse, and they have a hard time getting the two hands to do something different, right? But if you'll notice Brad's arm movements, you can see he's using a combination of both arm aim and wrist aim. So large sweeping motions for long turns and 180s, and then quick flicks with the wrist for precision and accuracy. And there are many different types of grips and aim styles that you can use in a game like Overwatch as well. Brad is a lower sensitivity player, which means that he has to move his mouse further to get the character to turn, but that gives him more precision and accuracy, but it also means he has to move his mouse further to turn around and do 360s and 180s and whatnot.
And I know here at Shenandoah, we have a setup where we have the exact same controllers and keyboards for everyone. And it's important to know your equipment, just like with athletes, and know the lag time of your mouse or your keyboard, and even know the hertz of the monitors that you're using, because that will change your reaction time or your output.
Absolutely, and that's something that we see when students pick their desk here. They kind of stay there because they get used to that spot. They get used to the way the mouse feels, the way the mouse pad feels, the keys and everything. And you're absolutely right. That consistency is very important for putting on a solid performance.
Now, do we also have the opportunity to switch? Do we have athletes that switch between the PC and the controller games?
We actually do. We have a player on our Counter-Strike and Call of Duty team who plays both keyboard and mouse as well as controller. Now this player is particularly gifted because they're just absolutely amazing at both. But you know, I've grown up on keyboard and mouse, and then trying to switch to controller for me, it feels clunky. It feels like a foreign device. It's just not an easy transition. Now what you're seeing Brad do here is he's taking advantage of the high ground. Oh, unfortunately he gets taken down by Symmetra teleporting in. You know, I'm not going to go too much into the details about Overwatch because there's a lot to explain. It's really not all that important. What's really important is Brad's performance here. And you can just see how consistent and how crisp his aim is. Once he finds a target, he locks on and he does not let go. And that's from hours of practice. I know that the head coach for Overwatch, who's a student here, he's having the Overwatch team do, I believe it's 2 hours of aim training and drills right now, or was at least leading up to the playoffs. And you can definitely see that pays off with the precision and accuracy that Brad's displaying.
Absolutely, and there's various programs that you can use for aim training or even reaction time and improving that coordination. Is there a specific software that we're currently using here?
Yeah, so currently we are employing Kovac Aim Trainer. What's nice about that is it lets you track your stats, it lets you set up custom drills, so it lets you actually track your progress. And you know, when it comes to improving in anything, it's important to be able to track that progress to be able to see that you're actually improving.
Absolutely. Research is important, and understanding what the benefit of some of these exercise training programs, the software that we're using, and making sure that it transfers to actual success on the game that you're performing on.
And you bring up an interesting point, Michele, with making sure it transfers. And that's, you know, one of the things that's kind of contentious about aim trainers is you're not actually in game, and a big thing that people struggle with when they're trying to aim is their movement. So movement can really kind of hinder what you're trying to do with the aim. But if you set up the correct drills using a program like Kovac, then you can kind of simulate that same thing. And there's also ways within the game, within Overwatch too, to practice that as well, like custom maps.
Absolutely.
It looks like Brad's going to stick to Tracer here, which I'm just a big fan of because it's so fast-paced and it's so quick. And I know it can be pretty hard to follow for people who haven't watched a lot of Overwatch, but I mean, we're seeing some really awesome gameplay from Brad here. He's one of the best players in the program, and you know, he's been that way since he came in. And a lot of the Overwatch team's success is because of Brad and his work ethic in the game.
Now, another thing with a lot of this first-person shooter is kind of the visual accuracy that you have to make sure that you can do the aim training, to make sure that you can have a good target on your shot. Are there any eye tracking devices that are available or that we use?
Not that we use, but there are eye trackers available. You'll see some popular Twitch streamers sometimes use eye tracking for different things, and that's really interesting as well because you're right, the visual aspect is very important. If you can't see, you don't know where to aim, right? So it's really cool watching some pro players use the eye tracker, and you can see what they're focused on, you know, what they're actually tracking, where they're looking, and it's pretty amazing seeing how their focus starts across the screen, back and forth, and how quickly they're able to acquire the targets.
Now, the one thing I noticed is Brad seems very relaxed, and in between, he takes a moment to really shake his fingers out, making sure that he relaxes or releases any tension that he's been holding while moving through this board. And I know that in terms of your posture and your position, it really helps to also relax the tension. So you want to make sure that you're sitting with both feet flat on the floor, your back upright, and you're wrist in a fairly neutral position. So I'm loving that Brad is actually demonstrating exactly what we want to see in that.
Absolutely, Michele. And gamers, take note. Listen to what Michele just said, because that is very important, and that will help you with your consistency and awareness, and also help protect you and keep your back and your shoulders and your arms and wrists in good condition as well. And I like that you talked about the relaxation, Michele, because that's actually one thing that I think separates Brad from a lot of players, is his ability to stay calm and relaxed, not only mentally, but physically when he's in an intense competition as well. I mean, we've seen some instances where he's surrounded and there's a bunch of stuff going on, but he comes out on top because he's able to stay calm and maintain that focus.
Absolutely. And that, again, comes with a lot of practice and confidence in your motions and even muscle memory, because you know what movements, what targets you have to do, what moves you have to perform in order to execute.
Exactly. And, that reminds me of something Brad once told me, Michele, when he was practicing Tracer, when he was first learning the character. So to get a little bit technical, there's an ability with Tracer where Tracer teleports forward. Tracer obviously has the 2 guns that shoot rapid fire, but the technique is that you shoot all the bullets in your gun at the enemy, and then you teleport forward and finish them with a melee attack.
Oh, nice.
And it's a very technical, you can do it through the enemy and whip around 180 degrees and hit them from behind. And Brad practicing that has given him that muscle memory to be able to perform 180s and to be able to be more accurate and quick.
And that also helps to emphasize the fact that what we're doing in our esports actually transfers, because you're using a lot of mental power, whether it's through the memory of your muscles or memory of the moves, just in general, of what codes, what pathways you need to use. So there's a lot of transfer and activity of the brain, and that improves our overall health. So there is a lot of benefit from video game playing.
Absolutely. And, I think, speaking as an older gamer myself, I can definitely attest to the benefits. Things like reflexes and hand-eye coordination, things that I've been able to keep up through my practice in gaming. And you talked before about confidence and having that through practice, and I think we're seeing that right here with Brad. The way he plays, you can just tell he knows what he's doing, he's confident with his actions, he's confident with his aim, and that's a result of all the time that he spent focused and practicing.
Absolutely. I can speak as a recreational gamer, growing up on the Nintendo and all of our systems back in the day, but I know that just having that amount of motion of the fingers and everything, it helped when I transferred into flute playing.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that, because I picked up Super Smash Bros. Ultimate a couple of years ago, and that's a really fast-paced game as well, and it's one that we're going to see. And after it took me a while to adjust there, my fingers would get tired and I'd have to stop for the day because I wasn't used to that kind of a workout.
Absolutely. But it increases the dexterity of your hands. And some surgeons even use video game as a opportunity to train their fingers and make sure that they are increasing the dexterity, increasing the coordination, and that will also transfer over to other aspects of their life.
Definitely. And it's really interesting because we're discussing the health and mental benefits of gaming, when typically when you talk about gaming, that's not really what you think of. You kind of think of the opposite, how it can be unhealthy. And that just goes to show, with a player like Brad, he's very busy with school and internships. He's able to maintain a balance because he's not spending all the time gaming, but using focused practice and understanding what he needs to work on, he's still able to maintain a high level of play, even with a packed schedule.
Exactly. And there are some downsides to playing for hours on end, and as you said, Brad isn't doing that. He has his practice schedule and his break schedule, but there are ways away from the computer to train your body to ensure that you're ready for play, such as these finger dexterity exercises that we'll talk about more later.
Definitely. And we can also touch on the mental aspect as well. There's mental training that has to go into being a competitive gamer. There's a lot of high pressure situations, a lot of situations where you have to make fast decisions, and if you're panicking in your mind, you're not going to be able to execute that. So the mental aspect is really important as well.
The one thing I found fascinating is learning that a lot of the professional gamers use some type of meditative or mindfulness to relax and make sure that they are prepared to de-stress before they start playing, because if you come into a game stressed, it will show in how you move and your accuracy.
Absolutely. And Michele, that's something that we've worked on implementing into some of our practices as well, because that is very important. Like you said, mindfulness or meditation, the ability to recenter and refocus, it's something that you have to train just like anything else.
Absolutely.
And that was a really awesome performance by Brad. I mean, just a very talented player.
3, 2, 1, go!
hours and hours of practice, as well as making sure that he's practicing just these range of motion and having the ability as a boss before he can go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can see right now how quickly his thumb is flipping, and it looks absolutely crazy, but you can see just how much control he has over the character, particularly that he's playing. And yeah, that's just a testament to how much time and effort that Alexander's putting into it. I coached the Smash team, and Alexander is a starter, and one thing that really stood out to me about him was his work ethic and his willingness to put in time outside of the game. Because what we really have to talk about is there's a difference between practicing and playing, right? And what we're seeing right now is the playing aspect. During practice, you can't just practice by jumping into matches and playing. You can, but it's not that efficient, right? We talk about focused practice and practicing with intent. So any great Smash player spends a lot of time in free play just practicing the moves, practicing the different techniques, short hops, long hops, reverse aerial rushes. There's a lot of technique and technicality that goes into Smash.
Absolutely, and this goes back to what we were talking about before. There's a lot of mental training that goes on because you have to memorize all of the keys, the combinations, and the patterns to make these moves happen and to execute them at the right time when you're in competition, because this is a one-on-one competition with another teammate of his right now.
Absolutely, and on top of that, you know, we talk about the mental aspect as well. There's a lot of knowledge that goes into Smash too. It's not just about being able to hit the inputs. If you don't know what you should do in those situations, that's not going to get you anywhere. So there's a lot of mental preparation that goes into Smash as well, such as knowing the matchups and understanding the other player's moves.
Exactly, I was going to say, you have to understand what the player's moves are. All of them, not just yours, but your opponent's also, so you can counterattack in the appropriate way.
Definitely, and that's also a part of practice. So something that an aspect of Smash is that different characters have different weights. So the way you win in Smash, as you just saw, is you build up damage and then you try to send the opponent flying off the stage. And since different opponents have different weights, that means at different damage percentages, they'll fly different lengths.
Yeah.
So you have to understand the matchups and understand the weights of the characters to know what moves and what combos to do. So it requires a lot of preparation and research, and again, a lot of time in free play as well.
Absolutely, because even if you're a novice Smash Brothers player, you have to find the character that works best for you, the patterns that really work best for you. And so once you find your athlete or your player for this game, then you can go into free play and start competing with the wide variety of characters.
Definitely, and then once you find that balance, you've got to practice. You've got what's called labbing, which is experimenting in free play against different characters, figuring out combos. But then you also cannot forget the fundamentals, and that's something that I love to preach: is fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. So still spending time doing short hop drills and other mechanical drills as well.
Now the posture for a console is a little different than what our posture for our PC gamers will have. As you see, Brad is leaning a little forward on his leg. We actually want your feet to still be planted flat on the floor and still maintain an upright posture. But I noticed that a lot of gamers have this forearms on the legs because it helps relax rather than holding the controller up. So it is best to have a desk or something that your arms can rest on while you're gaming.
Absolutely, Michele. And yeah, like you said, the way that Alexander is sitting and holding the controller, he's using his legs as a brace for his forearms, so that as he's rapidly making these inputs, he can do that accurately, and it's not moving the controller around. And the posture, as long as he's got the flat back and shoulders neutral, then that's the way we want to do it.
Now, Alex also seems like a very calm player. You know me, I would get upset and throw my controller somewhere.
You're preaching to the choir on that one. Yeah, definitely. And Smash is definitely a game that requires a lot of patience, as is any fighting game or one-on-one situation, because every mistake gets punished. If you lose, it's 100% on your shoulders. So it requires a really strong mentality. And you can see, that calmness translating into Alexander's gameplay, into the way he's carrying himself. It's definitely a very important factor.
Yeah, because even as he's going, we don't see any fatigue in his fingers yet. He's still able to make those quick movements with his thumb accurately, which is showing through his performance as he's playing the game.
Definitely, and you can see as well in the gameplay, one thing that a lot of Smash players run into is they start to hit a mental fatigue wall, which means that they start, instead of planning and playing patiently and trying to outplay the opponent, they just start running and throwing moves out. And I know from experience, Smash is a very mentally draining game. But you can see in the gameplay that the moves are still very calculated. There's no rushing. He's still very focused. And again, that's just a testament to the training that Alexander has put into being a great gamer.
Yeah, so all of that training has led to great dexterity in his fingers, full range of motion of the thumb, the ability to stay calm, and the mental clarity to remain de-stressed throughout it.
Absolutely. And that was an awesome demonstration
Yeah.
of Smash. We saw some really cool moves there. We're going to go to another quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back with the panel, which Michele and I will be a part of, and we're going to answer some cool questions about this whole process.
All right, everyone, welcome. This section of our event involves our panel discussion. Really excited about this. I'm going to take a minute and introduce everyone. I ask that our panelists just give a wave to our audience as I introduce you. So obviously to my right is Dr. Joey Gawrysiak. Dr. Gawrysiak is the director and associate professor of esports here at Shenandoah. To his right is Dr. Michele Pai. Dr. Pai is assistant professor in the Division of Athletic Training and associate director of the Performing Arts Medicine and Performing Arts Health and Fitness graduate certificate programs. She's really awesome. And next, we have world-class trumpeter, gold medal Global Music Award winner, Yamaha artist, and assistant professor of trumpet, Mary Elizabeth Bowden. And after that, we have Zach Harrington. Zach is he's to my left. Zach is the assistant director of esports and head coach here at Shenandoah University. Welcome, Zach. Next to him is Professor Chris Scroggins. Chris is the instructor of esports and esports coach here at Shenandoah University. Our incredible Overwatch player you witnessed earlier was Brad Blanchard, who is a sophomore esports athlete receiving his Bachelor's of Science in Esports. Our resident Smash Brothers champion is Alec Krecek, who is a junior esports athlete, also receiving his Bachelor's of Science in Esports. And finally, the incredible instrumental performance you heard earlier was delivered by our own Jonathan Toomer, who will be graduating soon as a senior violinist, receiving his Bachelor of Music and Performance. A huge welcome, and thank you guys for being here. There are two questions that guide this discussion. The first being is, what are the similarities in the practice, pedagogy, and performance of music and esports? As you have already seen a little bit of that as we've moderated and seen these performances. And the second is, how can each of these fields inform and improve upon one another? So thank you again for joining us. Dr. Gawrysiak.
Yeah, and I get to get started with the questions after those awesome performances. And as we're going through these questions, make sure you are still asking your questions in the chat. We will make sure to get to those towards the end here. We have some questions we want to get to, and then we'll get to our audience questions again towards the end. So continue to ask those questions, and we'll make sure to get to those when we get done kind of with the beginning questions here. But to get us started, and of course we're going to start with our students, as we always should. John, we're going to come to you first, okay? What is your typical practice routine? Talk about how many times per week, how many hours per day, and so on.
So because I am a student, I have a lot of classes. My practice schedule is typically broken down into like hour segments throughout the day. Typically it looks like a 3 to 4 hour practice day, like 5 or 6 times per week, depending on like what like ensembles I have that week, or depending on like whether I'm giving a performance that week or something like that. I'll take a day or two off just to get my body and my mind ready for that. In terms of what I practice, it changes on a day-to-day basis. Most of the time I'll warm up, which is like 15 to 20 minutes, and then I'll go into like rep with slow practice. And then like when I get close to recital dates, I'll do like run-through rehearsals, which typically takes a shorter amount of time because you're just running through pieces.
Yeah, great. Alexander, why don't you take the same question, talk about your practice routine, how many days per week, hours, things that you focus on. What is your practice routine like?
Sure. So typically on season, a typical Smash Brothers practice, or most of the esports practice in general, are typically 2 to 3 hours a day for 4 to 5 days a week, culminating typically on a day for Smash. Our competition day is on Friday, so Monday to Thursday we're preparing for that, and that again is typically broken up in 2 hours of structured time that can be spending an hour working on VOD review, so looking at past videos of either ourselves or competitors or pro players. And then the other half is spent working on just fundamentals, playing each other, practicing against each other. Sometimes we'll take the entire time to scrim against other teams, so practice against other teams just to prepare ourselves. And then over the weekend is a little bit of a break time, but a lot of the time Coach Harrington will give us homework to work on. So some sort of fundamentals that we need to work on, perhaps working on short hops, full hops, things like that. So we'll typically spend 2 to 3, maybe even 4 hours over the weekend just practicing, working on those things. And that's typically what our schedule looks like.
Nice. Any good coach should do that. Give you your homework.
right.
Yeah, we always have
Exactly.
homework around here, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
For sure. So a question for Brad, we're going to start with you. Kind of in the same vein. When we're talking about practice, we're talking about preparation, those kind of things. When you're faced with challenges in practice and preparation, what do you do to work through them? What are some actual strategies you use?
Yeah, so obviously it depends on what kind of challenge I'm having. You know, if it's a mechanical challenge, which is, you know, me playing bad or something, you know, that's something I need to, you know, talk to a coach about, or some sort of mentor. We have a coach for our Overwatch team, Enders. He's great. He can help you with just about anything. If it's a team issue, that means we're going to be looking at that in VOD reviews. So that'll be usually a 2-hour block sometime during the week. And we'll go over what happened, talk about what could be done better, you know, what we want to change going into next week, you know, maybe look at who we're playing next week kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it kind of depends, but usually I can work through most of my issues by myself because it's usually aim or that kind of stuff. But like I said, if it's team issues, VOD review, practice.
That's awesome. So this is already like some similarities just kind of with what you guys talked about as far
Right.
as like kind of preparation and what you're thinking through in that process. That's great. And Mary, to go to you, how about you as a world-class artist, someone who's been doing this a long time, has gone through the same process as a student, but now as a performer, what are some things that you do to overcome challenges in your practice sessions?
I think always being creative with finding solutions with your weaknesses. And I think an easy mistake to make is to, you know, on the trumpet, play the same thing over and over again and expect it to get better, even though you're not doing anything different.
Right.
So I'm always looking for new creative strategies and solutions to improve different aspects of my playing, and I encourage and have my students do the same within their practicing. Always trying 3 or 4 different things. There's a lot of different techniques you can use to improve a passage or a weakness. And another thing I want to mention is that I have stopped recently calling weaknesses with my students. I now call them future strengths. And I feel like this has really helped promote a growth mindset because, you know, how many times have all of us have put a label on ourselves of, I have trouble playing low notes. I don't like low notes. Well, if you label it as a future strength, then it's no longer the scary thing. And I think our minds really do believe what we tell them.
Wow. Yeah.
And something like that can kind of hold you back to become your best self for years when you have these self-limiting beliefs. So just changing the mindset, I think, is really, really key in growing as in any field.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great point. Talking about the mental aspect as well as the
Right.
physical, right? And across disciplines too. That's really interesting technique. Michele, let's come to you on some things here. What do you think some best practices are across these 2 different disciplines that could be implemented by other performers that would improve their practice process?
Well, thank you for the question. And Mary, I wanted to co-sign exactly what you said. Our words mean things, and our mind receives what we say. So you do have to change the mindset of what you say. And that will show as a positive improvement in your output or the performance. Another thing in terms of the mental aspect is visualizing the success. So we use a lot of visual imagery when we're training. And even if you're injured and you're unable to play for that day or for that time, you can visualize yourself, and you'll notice that as you're visualizing walking through the board or visualizing the notes in a passage, it helps you when you get back to playing. So another thing I wanted to mention, because all of our students were wonderful with describing their practice, and you see they practice for hours. We want to make sure that you're taking breaks throughout those long hours of practice. Your body will need, your physical body will need, 5 minutes away. So for every 30 to 45 minutes, it's good to step away, especially if you're in a asymmetrical position like a violin or even with your computer at a game. You want to stretch your body in the opposite direction of what you've been in for 30 to 45 minutes.
That's awesome. 30 to 45 minutes, gamers.
That's right.
Get up
That's
and stretch
exactly right.
and Take a break, and then you can get back on. That's great advice, Michele. Really appreciate you saying that so that we can enforce that. It's coming from an expert.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I really appreciate too how all these things they make sense because so many things are very similar. There's the opportunity as performing artists to be sedentary in many ways, right? Like how we sit or how we, and that really informs our performance. If we're not careful, we can really do a lot of harm very quickly. And the same thing with gaming. I mean, again, I've found myself, you kind of get into that mode of like 2 hours later, and you're there, and you get out of it, and you're like, holy cow, like what am I, like 90? What is?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It hurts.
Right, it hurts.
It hurts.
Absolutely. So actually, this next question. So we've talked a little bit about the practice and the preparation for what we do. And that's obviously extremely important. Let's get into the pedagogy, teaching, learning. This question is for you, Zach. What does a coaching session for esports look like for you guys? What does this mean?
Sure. So, and that really depends, Aaron, on. So I guess to begin with, it would be almost assessment of the player, right? So determining what their skill level is, what their base of knowledge is, where their fundamentals are, and building from there. I'm a firm believer in starting with the fundamentals, so if it's a newer player, teaching them the basics. And I thought Mary made a great point when she brought up practicing and doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So that's kind of the next step, is teaching that awareness, because practice makes consistent, not perfect. You have to practice the right things. So another part of that is teaching players to be aware and self-critical of their gameplay, to be able to pick out the flaws. Because as a coach, I only have so much time to spend with the players, so I think the time is better spent helping them be aware of their gameplay and developing the skills to improve on their own.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point. And I like that too, just the idea behind self-awareness. I think that was a huge key to getting students to the point where they realize, like, I didn't realize I was making a mistake or making, this, or have this issue or this problem. That's, 90% of the battle. So Mary, the same question to you. When you're coaching instrumentalists, your students, what does that look like? What are some strategies you're using? What are some goals you're trying to get out of your students?
So a conversation I've been having recently that relates to this, Dr. Toomer and I talk a lot about how to get students to improve and how to get them to not, they're so quick to think, oh, that just sounded bad. But when something goes really well and they have a breakthrough moment, to ask them, how did you do that? How can you get to that place on your own every day? Because we only have the lesson every week and some coachings, but my job is to teach my students on how they can become their best teacher, because that's where the real growth happens. And so finding those breakthrough moments, like, aha, do that again, and getting them to think of like, oh wow, that was great, and how can I accomplish that on my own?
Yeah, absolutely. Teaching yourself out of a job, right? Like, yeah, getting them to be their best teacher. That's awesome.
Yeah, to build on kind of individual stuff, we're going to go to Chris, who coaches with our Call of Duty team. And so, again, building on this idea of practicing as individuals, can you talk about coaching a group of athletes or musicians? How does that change? What is the dynamic coaching a group as opposed to coaching that individual kind of practice?
Yeah, great question. And so I obviously coach some of our Call of Duty players one-on-one, but most of the time we'll have them in a group setting because it is a 4-on-4 competitive game style. And for those of you who don't know at home, it's an action video game, also known as a first-person shooter, right? And so the goal is to capture an objective or eliminate the other team. And so when we're looking at a group setting, we often find that placement on the map actually is more important than eliminating the other team at first, right? And so you have to make them understand that, like Zach and Mary were saying, like breaking down those basics and teaching them to be kind of critical of their own play style. Because you can go off and run off and kill the team 10 times, but if you're in the wrong place, you might negatively affect your team, right? And so oftentimes when we're in a group setting, we break it down into stages. We want to focus on map placement first, then we focus on objective, and then we focus on elimination of the other team. And so they know in a group setting, if we don't even have control of the map, we should not be going to step 2 or step 3, because we're not going to accomplish that common goal that we're seeking after, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. And I also like the idea of the group dynamics in music. I mean, we can talk a little bit about this too, is that when you're coaching a group or teaching a group, style too. It's that individual, like, all right, what have I learned individually, and how do I apply this in the moment? And what kind of skill sets am I bringing up, you know, to remind myself? Because every situation is different, and I think that's something too that we could kind of bring to the surface, right?
Yeah, and I think when you teach them the basics, and then they know that there's this almost staged approach to it. When they go off on their own as a unit, they can identify exactly what they're doing wrong, right? And that's what you're talking about, being critical of your gameplay. And yeah, so in a one-on-one session, I find it very specific stuff. In a team setting, we zoom back out and make it more objective play style, objective based, if that makes sense.
And I see Alex nodding. Add something to that, Alex. Yeah, absolutely add something to that.
Yeah, I definitely think it is definitely like that, especially in a game like Smash, where it's traditionally played in a one-on-one setting where you only need to think about yourself.
Right.
In the collegiate setting, however, we play it in a crew battle style, which means that we take turns at 4v4, but we take turns in 1v1s.
Right.
So it really does matter about your team and kind of zooming out, where you're not just thinking about who am I playing next, like who's my next opponent, what is this one-on-one going to look like. You got to think about how you fit into the team dynamic, so you need to look at the bigger picture, look at what characters you play, what characters the opponents play, and how you can kind of fit yourself into the team rather than just thinking about yourself. I think Professor Scroggins definitely worded it well, where you have to zoom out when you're working with a team.
Yeah, that's actually really good, and I'm like immediately going to, we'll go to John here and let him talk a little bit about this, but like chamber sessions, right? Like when you're in let's say you're in a quartet or something like that, you have your individual, for those at home that you're in this esports world, so we have small ensembles, in other words, where John would be performing with maybe 2 or 3 or 5 other musicians in a kind of a smaller team setting. He's got his individual part, he's been coached on these parts, but also the coaching as a group. So yeah, speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure Professor Bowden can attest to this as well, but like playing in an individual setting is a lot different than playing in a chamber setting. But I would like to make a draw comparison to what Professor Scroggins said, and we're like having like map awareness, or like in this case like score awareness, like knowing where you fit into the rest of the parts and where like everyone else fits into you, and how to adjust your sound based off of that. That's a critical part in understanding how to play as a chamber musician. And it's less about the fine details. The fine details do matter, but ultimately, if you don't get like the basics of like playing in a group setting together, the fine details become less important in the grand scheme of things.
That's good.
Yeah, the comparisons are really cool to hear this, because we're talking across
Right.
gaming and music.
Right.
Two very
Totally.
different things on the outside.
One would,
But to
yeah.
hear the insight is really
absolutely the
telling
same.
about how similar they actually are.
It's exactly the same in many, many ways. So this question is, so to stay at John, so kind of going off of, so once we've coached, once we've gotten to the place where, hey, it's performance time. It's time to perform. It's time to show your game, whether that be in music or esports. When you're in that moment, like again, you were playing earlier, what are you focused on? What is your primary, secondary, kind of what goes through your mind, and does it change? Those kind of things.
So personally, I think it changes for every player. But I just like to clear my head like during and before a performance. If I tend to think about or overthink the performance too much, I will get inside my own head, and then I'll mess up, and then I'll try to stop and restart. And even when I messed up in the performance, because I did mess up in the performance, because not every performance isn't perfect. Like you'll have like something that you wish you would have redone. But even if you mess up in the performance, just like being able to like push through that and just keep going and continue to make music. I think that's like the overall goal for me as a musician, just like creating music, and regardless of what happens in the middle of it, the outcome is that I affected somebody.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so we'll go to Alex for this as well. Same thought process. When you're in performance, what are you thinking through?
I actually have to really agree with John here. When leading up to the performance, obviously you're trying to think about the matchups and where you fit on the team and what you're gonna do. But when you get in the game, you just you have to just go head empty, mind, do rely on the muscle memory that you've been practicing, excuse me, that you've been practicing, that you've been working on, making sure that your hands will do what you want them to without having to overthink. Because when you start overthinking about everything, that's when you start making mistakes.
Right.
That's when you start messing things up. And really what you want to do while you're in the performance is just think about the other person, and even sometimes just your teammates as well. You don't want to have to think about what you're doing or what you should be doing or just kind of complicating the process. Instead, you want to make sure that your fundamentals are there. You can rely on those without having to think about, oh, gotta hit this short hop, or if I mess up, it's all over. Instead, you just want to make sure that your mind is empty. And Zach talks about this a lot, but go into a flow state of mind and just kind of let your mind just do its thing, honestly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and John, nobody noticed you mess up, so it's okay that you messed up a little bit because it still sounded amazing. So only a few trained people maybe picked up on that, but I certainly did not. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Not everybody's perfect, but it sounded great. Brad, coming to you and staying in this performance idea, talk about what strategies you use to keep a consistent performance so that one game you're not throwing and the other game you feel like you're flowing. Right? See what I did there?
There we go. Nice.
Yeah, well, I pretty much practice as much as I can. I mean, obviously, I still throw every once in a while, but usually I try to at least warm up, 15, 30, usually an hour before a match. Try to make sure I'm, consistently doing or at least feeling where I'm supposed to be at. I'm always, right before I get into a game or anything, I'm always making sure that I'm, ready to enter that flow. I'm focusing on what I need to focus on. Everything else is around me, that kind of thing. And then a lot of it comes with training tools, like aim training and stuff. Like we talked about, like we use Kovacs or Aim Lab here for people who want to do mechanical training for their games. I usually do that for at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours a week. They basically just train your movement in game and your aim and all that kind of stuff, and it tracks it and gives you performance indicators and that kind of stuff. So I kind of rely on tools and then also just kind of playing the game enough, making sure I'm comfortable with where I'm at before I'm getting ready to game.
Okay, and Mary, coming to you, similar question. What are some strategies you use to keep a consistent performance?
And I hear a lot of similarities with the word fundamentals. When I'm on a tour and I have a lot of performances, I'm not running through the music. I'm working on my fundamentals, and I'm making sure everything is healthy and that I can do my job. If I were to rush the process and try to run the show and test things out, it would be not great for the muscles. And we've talked a lot about, practice and performance. What you practice is what's going to happen on stage.
Right.
And so you want to, that the goal is to get on stage and present what you can do in the practice room. And I think a lot of young musicians or people might think like, oh, when I got on stage, it's going to be amazing, but different than the practice room. And that's not the case. You just want it to feel the same as the practice room. And that is the ultimate goal. And talking one thing about teamwork, I was thinking about a memory of the Chicago Bulls. I grew up in Chicago during when they won all the championships, and the Bulls really took off once Phil Jackson got Michael Jordan to bring out the best in his teammates. That is when they really started winning, and that's when things were clicking, when he would pass the ball to someone else and let them score the winning shots rather than just trying to carry the team. And I feel the same in the brass quintet. We're always passing the ball, letting the person with the melody shine, knowing the score really well, as John mentioned, just being fully prepared to help out your team in a chamber group.
Nice. Michael Jordan was known for passing the ball, maybe not so much in his early days, but certainly a good distributor and putting the fun in fundamentals. Let me keep going on these. How many puns can we get here? But Michele, let's go to you a little bit to draw some comparisons and talk about what some strategies are that people can implement to keep that consistent performance from the athletic training point of view.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad that Brad mentioned warming up before any competition, because that is honestly going to help your performance. They found that when you don't warm up, you're not increasing the internal temperature of your muscles. And there was research that showed that cold hands actually decreases your performance while gaming. The same can be said for your instrumentalists. You have to warm up your entire body. And for both activities, you really need that upright posture. If you remember when Jonathan was playing, he was moving through it, Now he has to have a strong core and scapular stabilizers to make sure that his arms can focus on playing rather than really trying to overcompensate. The same thing with our video gamers. We have to have a strong core and our upright posture to make sure that we can have a good performance. Once you have that, warm up, your posture, and even the muscle memory, as we keep saying, making sure that when you're practicing, please start practicing the skills slowly. It's the same with scales. You're going to start going slow. If there's a challenging section in the music, you have to work through it slowly. And as you practice it and as you get it right, then you can start speeding it up and working on the tempo of the speed. The same with our first-person shooter games. You want to make sure that you memorize and you're comfortable with changing your fingers and having that control before you start getting a little faster with it.
Wow, that's awesome. And Michele, so you're talking about kind of as a great segue into this physical aspect of both ways. So give us some strategies, give us some things that both sides can use that will benefit.
Absolutely. Both sides can use the breaks, the warm-ups, the practices, as we've already talked about. We touched on the mental or visual imagery. So on the times when you're away from your instrument or away from your PC or game, you want to make sure that you're visualizing the map, visualizing your notes or the score, making sure that you can hear the sound that you want to come out of your instrument, or making sure that you're prepared mentally before you get there. Well, the more you prepare mentally, the more relaxed you are when it's time to perform. So that gives your body a break while still training towards performance. So those three things plus the mental imagery is really helpful. The one thing we haven't touched on yet is the nutrition. We can't ignore the fact that we have to stay hydrated. Our hydration affects our eye health, it affects our overall performance, but also having a healthy diet affects our stress levels as well as our overall being. So having a healthy diet is really important, especially on game days. It's the same as when we work with our athletes, making sure that they have the nutrition that they need to proceed.
That's excellent. Absolutely. So we can't drink gallons of energy drinks, right?
Yeah, my energy drinks isn't sounding too good right now anymore. Sometimes it's needed, but I had water too.
That's right.
Gotta hydrate.
And you have to rest, which unfortunately, with the amount of hours that we spend practicing and training, we don't always take into account how beneficial sleep and rest are for our bodies.
And going to class.
Absolutely.
Right? That's part of it too.
We are lifelong learners here at Shenandoah.
For sure. Yeah, so actually, maybe Chris, you could talk a little bit about this too, with when you're coaching players, when you're on the esports side of things. Talk a little bit about nutrition and health and kind of mental acuity, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And we see this in the classroom too. So I teach the esports performance class here, and we begin with holistic wellness, right? Because like Michele was saying, just being well-rounded. It comes down to hydration, nutrition, and you got to look at everything. She was talking about physical activity and resistance training and strengthening muscles. We also talk about, antagonist muscles and stuff like that. Like, don't overtrain one area. You have to even it all out. So we give that, core foundation. And then when you start looking at the research, wellness and physical wellness especially is important in esports, right? Because cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone that's released, the levels in esports are equivalent to NASCAR drivers. So it's extremely stressful. And then max heart rate is getting up to 180 beats per minute. That's like 20 beats per minute less than some of these students' max heart rate they should be performing at, right? And so traditional sports has done a great job at building in breaks in gameplay because it is very physical. We talk about physicality in sport. However, in esports, there is no built-in break sometimes. A League of Legends match could be 45 minutes straight, and your heart rate could be up. You could be stressed. And so that's where that nutrition, the hydration, all come in, and especially caffeine. We were joking about energy drinks. We talk about that in performance because you have to realize that the half-life of caffeine is 5 to 6 hours, right? And if your heart rate's already elevated, if you're drinking 600 milligrams of caffeine in a day, your heart rate's gonna be through the roof, you're gonna be overly stressed, and you're gonna be anxious. And so it really matters a ton in esports, right? Trying to reduce the amount of physiological stressors on the body and to be healthy going into that performance so that we can have a sustainable, prolonged, like, good performance, right? I don't know if that answers your
Yeah,
question.
that's absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a reason why he's teaching the esports performance class here at SU. And Chris, I know you've talked about students in that class are really surprised, like from day one, how much of an impact nutrition and training has on gaming. Because a lot of students haven't heard any of this before they take your class. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, and so I was struggling with, like, do I implement wellness or do you just go straight into, like, cardio and resistance training, right? And wellness was really groundbreaking for some of these students. They had never heard about, you know, the 8 dimensions of wellness we talk about in class. And so having that foundation and then applying the more advanced stuff to that, yeah, they said that they got a lot out of it. And then knowing, like, hey, deadlifts to strengthen my lower back and my core can actually improve my Overwatch gameplay, like, that's pretty insane, right? Like, they had never made these connections prior to the class.
And I will say, I mean, this is something that, and I can attest to that we don't have a lot of these conversations, but it's starting to come to the surface more and more. And it's extraordinarily important if we were just kind of listen across the aisle to some of our friends in the athletic department, things like that. And again, hence this kind of forum is super beneficial to everyone's performance.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Let's go to Zach. Zach, I got a question for you because not only do you coach some of the teams here, but you're a gamer. You know, you call yourself a washed-up gamer. I don't think you're that washed up. What do you think are some of the cognitive benefits of engaging in esports, and how does it translate into other areas of your life?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we talked about mental preparedness and training, and I believe we spoke a bit about mindfulness and meditation. If you're a gamer and you're doing it at a high level, you have to maintain high levels of concentration and focus over a long period of time. So you're training your brain and your body you're giving it that endurance, right? So I think there are great benefits cognitively. It helps with reflexes, recall. The brain's like another muscle, right? You have to practice, you have to keep it active. So you're exercising all these different things. And also if you're progressing as a gamer, you're also learning new things as well. So you're continuing to learn and expand that mindset. And I think it's really interesting, the conversation we're having about the holistic wellness and the tie there is between both physical fitness as well as mental health too. So, you know, I think what Professor Scroggins is doing with that class is really important. And I think that's part of the reason why we've seen so much success this season, because the players are now aware of that and they're starting to implement this more healthy, holistic lifestyle into their lives.
Yeah, some really good points in there. And we're going to move over to John because you've got a unique perspective on kind of the same subject because you're a high-level gamer and a high-level musician, right? You compete on the varsity teams. Obviously, everybody just saw your proficiency as a musician, or I guess heard more than saw, and saw. But talk about the same thing. How does competing, what are the cognitive benefits of competing in esports and being a high-level musician? How does that translate into coursework and other areas of your life?
So I guess I'll start like directly from like esports to music. I definitely think like communication has gotten a lot more streamlined for me because I play Overwatch, especially as a support player. Communication is like vital to like understanding where people are, what ultimates are available, what ultimates you plan to use, especially positioning as well. So being able to kind of communicate efficiently with teammates in esports has helped me a lot with communicating like chamber ensembles or even in orchestra rehearsals as well. In reference to just like my daily life, for me it's like I notice a lot more details now because like again when I'm playing Overwatch you have to notice like everything, especially because there's like so many visual and audio cues within the game that can key you into like stuff that could win or lose a fight. So overall like my awareness and my detail orientation has gotten better. I honestly feel like my finger independency has gotten better, which is really helpful for me as a string player because a lot of what I do is depending on like how well my fingers can act individually and not necessarily as like a unit. And then I think it's also just helped me in terms of like mental, just being able to like calm myself like in the middle of something. I know if you notice like during my performance, I close my eyes a little bit of times. By a little bit, I mean a lot. And that's just like me sort of like doing like a mental reset. There will be times where like I notice my heart rate goes up a little bit, or like my left and right hand will get tense. And so I'll just need to do like a quick mental reset, or like a mental reset during like a fight in Overwatch, and then I'll be good to go for like the next little bit. So it's helped me in terms of like being able to understand like how my mind works in relation to my body, being able to like adapt to certain changes that happens on the fly.
That's awesome. Yeah, really, really good points. It's really cool to see how these kind of skills and the practices you go through, the routines you have, will impact not just gaming or music, but also so many other areas of your life, the impact it can have. And so I think we've done our best to try to trip them up, but they've answered all these questions really well. But what's really exciting is that we have a lot of questions coming through from the audience.
This is awesome.
And so, you know, these are kind of ones that myself or Aaron will read these off, and they're not really directed at anybody here. So if you want to chime in on any in particular that you feel like you have a good kind of look into, feel free to speak up on these. And like I said, we have a lot of them, so we'll try to get to as many of these as we can before we run out of time. But great job, audience, and in the chat. Keep them coming. If you still have questions, get them in there. We'll try to get to as many as we can here. So we'll just, I guess, dive into this, and I'll start with this first one. How long is it recommended to play until you reach the point that you aren't improving in gameplay, or is it all subjective? Anybody want to try with that, John?
So I personally believe that as a musician and as a gamer, you will rarely ever get to a point where you can't find something to improve upon. If you get to the point where you don't have anything to improve upon, then there's
call us, right? Like, we'll
call us. Yeah.
Like
figured out the key to life.
like even some like the top, like the elite tier pro players always are like working on something, even in their scrims or in their practices. And the same goes for musicians. Like, there's never a perfect performance. There's always something we can improve upon. And there's also not a perfect practice because everyone's a unique individual. So it's just like, there's never really a point where you get to like the ultimate peak. But I think that's also like what makes being a gamer or musician fun. Just like being able to like break these plateaus and just like increase steadily over time.
Yeah, that's good. I see Alex nodding. Yeah, add something to that, Alex. Go for it.
I was just going to say, probably what the question is referring to are these plateaus.
Mm-hmm.
And this is definitely something that is very common, especially in esports, where there are periods where you feel like you're improving a bunch. Like, you're like, wow, every day I'm getting better. I've just learned a new technique. I learned how to play this character, and now I'm just getting better and better. And then you reach a point where you feel like you're not improving anymore, and it's at this plateau. So a lot of gaming kind of looks like a doop, 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 kind of like that. And understanding how to break through those plateaus is really, really important. And I think a lot of it is coaching, if you have a good coach who can help you break through that plateau, as well as VOD review, looking at yourself, looking at what you're doing, and maybe you see something, hey, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Looking at what pro players are doing, what people who are professionals are doing, how their gameplay differs from your gameplay. And then also, maybe in order to get past the plateau, maybe what you need to do is take a break. We haven't talked about it a lot, but burnout is a really big thing in esports, and kind of overwhelming yourself with the game to a point where you don't feel like you're getting better, and sometimes you feel like you're getting worse. Just being able to take a break and get away from that burnout is really big. And I'm sure as a musician, you probably experience something similar. For Smash, when I get overwhelmed, when I feel like I'm reaching a point of burnout, I just stop playing Smash. I play a different game, or I go for a walk, or I just do something different in order to get my mind away from that and kind of just reset myself.
And Chris, you just have something to add to this.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it with the boop 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 chart. I think the boops get shorter as you progress, right? Like, it's going to take more training to increase that level of gameplay because you're slowly mastering this craft over time. And what we've kind of talked about is practicing with intention, right? Rather than how long does it take, it's using those tools that we've all talked about, being more critical of your gameplay, pulling out that little piece, and then practicing it for that, maybe not for 10 hours, but for an hour or two, and really just isolating that piece to make it better, right? I think that really helps you get over those plateaus, is going into a practice with intention rather than just going in and kind of like free playing, right? And I feel like that's probably the same for music as well. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding at the other side. It's like, everything has to have a purpose behind it, right? That's what I ask myself when I go in to coach our Call of Duty team is like, what is the purpose of this practice? Is it just so that we can say that we practice for 2 hours? Or is there something that we're actually going to target and improve upon in this process?
Yeah, that's really just Michele, go ahead. Yeah, chime in on that. So we'll.
The boop boop
Our
boop.
audio
You keep talking about
guys
the boop
are
boop.
awesome.
The boop, boop, boop is real. And I love what you all are saying. And one of the things that I wanted to add is that it's not just that you're having this plateau and then you need to stop completely. What Alex said is that you actually can just play a different game and you have a transfer of learning because you're still working your thumbs, you're still working your technique. The other thing that you can do is making sure that you're staying very relaxed, very calm, working on hand-eye coordination, and maybe doing that through another activity. For Jonathan, it probably works out well because he's still working on his finger dexterity through playing the violin, and that can transfer back, again, this transfer of learning, it will transfer back to his gaming.
Yeah, I was looking at some of these questions as you were talking as you were literally talking about those things that Alex was saying, and it's interesting that we've a lot of these questions. Somebody asked, in that kind of thing when it comes to musicians and athletes, as far as like when you train or when you practice, where's that point? Like, what are some things that we're thinking through? And just, again, going back to that idea of awareness, I think that is like one of the key points here too when it comes to pedagogy, but as a performer. Mary, did you want to, so we have a professional, right? So when you get to those plateaus, for you, like, what does that mean for you? What are you doing?
We talked a little bit about this, about visualization, and that is a huge part of my practice. And I've worked with performance coach Don Green, who has worked with Olympic athletes and is now a musician coach, and he has this book called Performance Success, which is amazing. And I've also worked with him one-on-one. And I have an injury. I was hit in the face with a frisbee. I don't play frisbee. It just happened like randomly. And I almost ended my career. And I feel the scar tissue every day in my lip. And I don't care anymore. Because I've done the training. I do lots of visualization, and when I was healing from that, I was imagining my lip healing, and I was doing tons more of mental reps of my performances, and that has stuck with me. Now that the injury doesn't bother me anymore, but I still do a lot of ice and heat on that area of my face, and it's just continuous. But I think it's made me a much stronger physical musician, because the trumpet is very physical. You're relying on these muscles, and you have to be, again, like Michele was talking about, a lot about the body staying relaxed and not playing with tension. And musicians and probably gamers too, you're dealing with a lot of repetitive motion, and you might get an injury, and you'll have to overcome that. And I think that's kind of tied in with having healthy practice habits, because I know a lot of musicians who never have any kind of injury or problem to work through. All of a sudden you're in your 40s, it's not going to be the same. Your muscle and body, it's going to start to change. And if you don't have these practice habits of doing a lot of visualization and that kind of training, it's hard for those musicians if they get an issue in their 40s. And I've seen people have to either quit, or they really have to work really hard to find that path at that point in their lives. Yeah, and I like I think both feedback, right, is like a big key here that we've talked about too in both worlds, that go to someone else who's on the outside looking in, and that can answer to maybe some flaws or some things, some difficulties, some challenges that you're coming up with. And I think that's really, really important, to look to people, as you mentioned right at the beginning there, going to someone to get some feedback. Give me some feedback, to help me get through this. That's really, really important as a daily thing, even, and weekly thing. Other questions? What do we got?
Yeah, we've got time we can throw another one out there. I think a lot of these have to do with transferability of skills. Because a lot of people are asking about, as a musician, what is it like to pick up a controller? As a esports player, what would it be like to try to pick up an instrument to try to play with that transferability? And so I don't know what that answer would be, because I used to play the tuba when I was in marching band, and I wasn't good at that. And now I try to play video games, I'm not good at that either. So my skills don't transfer anywhere.
Yeah.
But I guess John, this would be a good one for you, because you're in both worlds again. What is that like? What is that transferability like? Do you think being a musician gives you an advantage to go then be a gamer? Or do you think it's two very different skill sets, even though the muscle memories might be similar?
I think that because the muscle memory is similar, it becomes easier to transfer from one to the other. Well, specifically for my instrument, because there's, unlike the trumpet, which Chris Rob plays, there's not a lot of breath involvement. It's a lot more of just like left hand and right hand, and all of the muscles that are connected to like the arms, chest, shoulders, back. And because those muscles are more directly involved with what I do, or like the core of what I do when I play, it becomes easier to transfer those from here to here. Especially since like I also started off on piano, so like it's something that I've grown accustomed to as well, like just the general position. But yeah, it definitely like for me, I definitely noticed like my dexterity as a musician transfers over to Overwatch, and vice versa, especially in like being able to like memorize like certain actions.
Sure. And there's even a conversation here that we aren't having, which is kind of languages back and forth. Like,
Sure.
I think as a if I may just as a conductor, I think in gaming world we call this game sense, like knowing when to do what, where, and how, right? And as a musician, we have the same awareness. You talked about score study, looking at the big picture, but then also knowing where I fit in that big picture, and in that moment what I'm doing, responding to other people playing. When I give a cue or something like that, the feedback that I get immediately, what's happening, and I know it's the same for us. If I'm playing, I'm an Apex Legends guy, right? If I'm playing Apex again, very very quick, right? Things have to happen so fast. Responding to that, and I think that's key. And I've noticed that just the mental acuity part, like there's like an awareness. You start kind of looking inside things more than you didn't before, and I think that's kind of awesome. Yeah, do we have time for one more, or I think?
Well, I do want to get to kind of a question and a plug that I want to send to Michele to put you on the spot, because there's a question I think from our Facebook audience here about future plans to collaborate between the conservatory, esports, and athletic training. I think it's a perfect chance to talk about Spark and Spark Plus. Could you give us a little bit about that?
Awesome. So we do have future plans that are already in the works. So this year was actually our first year that we held a wellness screen for our eSport varsity team. So at the beginning of the season, we actually took them through a preseason screening, similar to what you would see at the combine, making sure that all of the athletes' posture was assessed. And then we developed individualized training programs to work on those posture, muscle imbalances, and flexibility. And that is something that's going to definitely continue. Now, we do that with our conservatory in the dance and music theater departments, but we are looking to open the gates into all the instrumentalists also. And we want to house all of that in our new Spark Center. So Spark stands for the Shenandoah Performing Arts and Rehabilitation Center. You have to go through all of the letters. And the plus is actually what we added because we wanted to include the gamers. So if we can show our logo somehow, but if you look at the logo, it's actually like the plus on your gaming controller.
It's the D-pad.
Yeah. So we're trying to make sure that not only are we serving all of our performing arts students as well as our esports students, but we're also developing research to understand better techniques to improve the performance as well as the general health and mental wellness of all of our conservatory and esport athletes.
Yeah, I think it makes too much sense not to have more collaborations. At a school
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Shenandoah that has such a great conservatory program, fantastic athletic training, and a world-class esports program, if I do say so myself, I think it makes too much sense not to have these kind of collaborations. And I think we've seen throughout this entire production today all the similarities and the advantages that we can learn from each other, and that these worlds are so similar, and we can learn from each other to get better at all these things, but also a healthier lifestyle inside of what we do, but outside just in general as well.
Absolutely, and I even want to say there is transfer of learning even from esports to instrumentalists, but outside of that, if you'll know, there are some surgeons that use video games or playing the piano to help with their dexterity. So if you're in the health profession field, it is very helpful for you to have that outlet that will allow you, again, to still work on your finger dexterity but will transfer to your performance in your occupation or your future occupation.
For sure.
Great words, great words. And I know we didn't get to every question today. We apologize, chat. We got to a lot. I think we touched on pretty much everything that I see on here. But we're happy to continue to engage in the conversation. You can reach out to us through our Twitch channels and look us up. Our bios are online. Look at the Shenandoah University website to find our email addresses as well. We always love engaging in these conversations. So if we didn't get to your question, we do apologize. But hopefully today, throughout the course of this, you learned as much as I did and everybody else here and really saw the similarities. And before we kind of sign off here, and I pass it back to Aaron Hardwick here to wrap us up, huge shout out to everybody here, all the panelists. Thank you very much for your time today. Students on the panel, also students behind the scenes. I mean, moving that boom around, that was like, just watching that as a performance in and of itself, doing that. In the production room, awesome job. Thank you all for everything that you do. Really appreciate that. OMC, thank you for being here as well. You know, it does take a village to make this happen. You know, so what you see on the screen is just the tip of the iceberg for what's happened behind the scenes. And Aaron, you've done such a great job getting, kind of wrangling the cats around here to get us organized on this production. So thank you for everything you've done to make this happen. It was your vision and your work that made it what it is. So we can't thank you enough for this and including us in the conversation. And we're looking forward to doing more of this.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end. And that's the whole point of this idea of we play together is just collaboration and community. And that's inherent in both of our worlds in music as well as esports. But also during these times, I just thought it was a great way to showcase what we do here at Shenandoah. But also, again, as far as education and pedagogy, what we should be doing, right? And so, yes, I echo that. Thank you so much to everybody. You guys have been absolutely incredible. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Esports program. Again, Michele, amazing. Thank you so much. You guys and Golder and all the sound people, and you guys are great. So thank you so much. Thank you all. Full Sail, Esports Research Network, all our friends across the globe. It's been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.